From the Jokic brothers facing a classic rags to riches story to having each other's backs wherever and whenever, here's the truth behind Nikola's brothers. They didn't have it easy growing up in Serbia. You'd think that every kid deserves a semi-normal childhood growing up, but Nikola was never that lucky. He grew up during a time when Serbia was drenched in war, and bombings were more common than breakfast. Back when he was just 4 years old, him and his brothers would be huddled in their broken-down home, everything shut off, as bombs went off around them for hours on end. Jokic talked about how hard it used to be, and how they basically lived in the dark. Apparently, at the start, things were so bad that they often had to shut off electricity as early as 9 a.m. just to avoid becoming targets of the war that waged on around them. It couldn't have been easy, being exposed to such brutality so early on in life. Nikola has often come out and talked about how he has his brothers to thank, along with his parents, for always being there for him and never letting him feel hopeless. Even when he thought there was no way out, his family made sure to comfort him and help him through all the tough times. Soon after the initial war stopped and nationalism rose in the country, civil wars began pretty much right after. These were even worse and lasted for the better part of a decade. However, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. While Jokic wasn't blessed with a lot growing up, what he did have was a supportive family. In fact, he's often mentioned how competitive him and his brothers were growing up. They pushed him to keep getting better, and now, well, we all know how far he's managed to get. His brother, Nemanja, in particular, loves to push Nikola whenever they play a friendly game of basketball, often tackling him to the ground to get the win.
So what is your favorite pass that you've seen your brother make so far this year?
Well, he's so creative with his passes. I can't even pick one. I don't know. Maybe that lob in London.
One thing's for sure, and that's the fact that this dude's life at home is pretty set. I mean, he's living in Denver with his girlfriend and both of his brothers. His parents come to visit from time to time. What more could you ask for? But let's rewind a little bit. His journey in basketball started with Lex, a Serbian team in the Adriatic League. It wasn't long after that he was able to become named the MVP for that league. It was at this point that the Nuggets realized that this kid was no joke, and they scrambled to sign him. By 2014, Jokic was drafted by the Nuggets, though he opted to stay in Europe for an extra year to further work on his skills and become a better player overall. Before coming to the NBA, Jokic went on to lose 35 pounds, which ended up paying off big time, as he was able to get playing time as a rookie. This led to his infamous double-double in his 12th game for the Nuggets. The rest? Well, it's history. Speaking of which, you have to wonder how his relationship is with his brothers these days. After spending a childhood together, decorated by war, Nikola talked about how it brought him and his two brothers closer than ever.
Every move, I back, I have a chance to back.
He's like a scout.
What does he do with it?
Evaluates every game.
Why?
He fouls, then he rebounds, then he goes back.
And helped them form a close-knit bond. They became a pack and won't ever be seen separated from one another. If you see Jokic outside of an NBA court, you can bet his brothers won't be more than a few steps behind. Like I mentioned, he lives in an apartment in Denver with his girlfriend and brothers. Everybody lives together, which from what I can tell is a nice change of pace from the usual. Oh, and they've got a few quirks in their household, like how everybody has to wear matching footwear. I mean, you might find it weird, but it's kind of cute in a wholesome way. They also have a small Nerf basketball hoop in their apartment, where the family decided against dunking and instead, during their games, resort to tackling each other to the ground. I guess they just do things differently in Serbia. One thing that I've noted is how close the whole family is. One of the brothers, Nemanja, also fancies himself as a chef. During an interview, he proudly talked about how he handles all the family barbecues and how he's the griller in the family, often whipping up some Serbian sausage whenever he gets the time. Of course, when stuff hits the fan and rumors start floating around, his brothers are there to dive into the whole thing head first. Like back in 2021, the Nuggets had a little tussle with Miami, and Jokic ended up injuring Morris, a Heat player, and almost started a riot between the two teams. Later on, they faced off against the Heat once more, though this time, instead of breaking down into violence, Denver straight up destroyed Miami 120-111. They didn't just stop there either, as they went on to stop at a club in Miami and party their hearts out. The level of shade thrown in Miami's way was insane that night. Twitter exploded with fans commenting on how insanely awesome Nikola had played in that game and that he deserved every bit of celebration that came with it. It was pretty insane to watch as Jokic wrecked the Heat on the court, dropping double digits in points, then stayed the night and partied in their city like there was no tomorrow. One thing's for sure, And that's the fact that these Serbians know how to put on a show. Work hard, play hard, right? Fans talked about how Nikola and his brothers had come to Miami, threatened the entire franchise, proceeded to beat their ass, then gone on to party late into the night. This was probably one of the most badass moments in sports history. While his brothers are always there for him, you have to wonder how things are with his parents. Nikola actually talked about this a while back in an interview and mentioned how his parents often come out to Denver and support him at his games. He talked about how his dad gets really excited during his games and often starts shouting during them. If that wasn't enough, he also starts shaking the chairs and almost starts throwing them around. Wow. Let's just say Jokic's dad is the only hype man he's ever gonna need. I guess it's a good thing that his dad is so supportive. I mean, it's always nice to have someone like that cheering for you, even if you're not having the best day at the court. From what I can tell, the entire family seems to be pretty close-knit and are always in contact with each other. Whether it's crazy house rules or just being there for each other, these guys always have each other's backs. He didn't really talk about his mom much, though from what I can tell, if everyone else in his family is tight, then he's probably got a great relationship with her as well. As long as things keep on going great for the guy, he'll keep leveling up in life. Now that he's a big star, he's been able to change his family's life for the better. And I'm sure he feels awesome about being able to fly his parents out whenever he wants. Speaking of supportive, his brothers once had to be held back from getting into a brawl with the Suns players. Back in 2021, the Nuggets were nearing playoff elimination and were facing off against the Phoenix Suns. Things got a bit heated, and Nikola ended up getting into a bit of a scuffle with Devin Booker. Now it was clear that the MVP was a bit agitated already. I mean, who wouldn't be? The man's team was about to be kicked out of the playoffs and lose their chance of winning the title. The ref decided to take things a step further and ejected Jokic from the game. This caused him to get even angrier and get into a bit of a shoving match with Booker. When more players started to get involved, the Jokic brothers decided that they were mad too and stepped onto the court. Eventually, the crowd started getting rowdy as well, as it looked like things were about to break out into a full-scale brawl. But it was Nikola's brothers who really had to be held back, as they were swinging in an effort to protect their baby brother from anybody who thought punching the 7-foot center was a good idea. Honestly, if you have brothers like these, who needs bodyguards? Am I right? I think I've mentioned enough times already, these guys are really tight, and there's probably never going to be a game where the entire Jokic family won't be sitting courtside, cheering their youngest member on as he drains bucket after bucket.
Concentrate on Nikola. Do you watch him all the time, or do you watch the game?
I mean, I watch the game, but I'm focused on him. Yeah.
From having each other's backs wherever and whenever, to the Jokic brothers facing a classic rags to riches story, that was the truth behind Nikola's brothers.